It's the behind the shade show.
What kind of impact does one partner who's always thinking doom and gloom have on the relationship then?
Oh, I mean, if we're with a person who's in that constant space, but if I am continuously showing beyond the doom and gloom, right? And I'm continuously showing, hey, I'm here, I'm showing up, but the expectation is disproportionate to what's being shown without any change. At one point, the other partner will get exhausted about it, right? So I think there's a reciprocity of if I have somebody who's come from doom and gloom, who's come from a traumatic space, I will have a greater understanding of your triggers if we communicate about it. Um, but I think it becomes really important to then bring light to the times when I am doing something that's positive. So, for example, let's say that one partner grew up being silenced all the time. Whenever they would speak, they would be shut down. They've learned that nothing that they say is of interest. Now here they go and they decided that I'm going to be really educated and turn this around. And what I have to say is worth of being heard. But I still have this thing that with people in my life whom I love, not my professional life, but in my personal life, they don't listen to me, right? Well, even if I'm listening to you now, we're in a partnership and I'm listening to you, the narrative of I'm not heard can remain. For as much as I try to hear, the narrative remains. I may get frustrated. But if you're able to notice the times when you've been heard by me, then it starts to challenge, to chip away in that narrative that everybody silences me and don't listen to me. So if you and I are having a conversation and I repeat back what you said, I'm like, oh, that's very interesting. I hear you. And you acknowledge, thank you, I feel heard. That goes against your dominant narrative of I'm never heard, I'm never heard, I'm never heard. Does that make sense?
How can someone identify what their dominant narrative is so they're not being hurt in that way?
There's a type of therapy called narrative therapy that focuses exactly on that, right? What's my dominant narrative? What are the anecdotes that I tend to say to myself about myself or to others about myself? How do I usually perceive things? And it comes from a construct of our experiences. So I'm trying to identify what my dominant narrative is. Give me a minute. Let me think about that so I can try to figure that one out. Okay, so for the longest time, I've been the youngest of my entire family for a long time. 12 years later came my little brother, who's 12 years younger than I am. And then many years later, my uncle had another daughter. But for a long time, I was the only one. Um, and Freud used to say when you go back to your parents' house, like you turn a specific age. So my dominant narrative when I'm with my family goes back to I'm the youngest. Mind you, I have my PhD. I'm a 39-year-old woman. I wrote my book. I go back to that 14-year-old girl, right? Because my dominant narrative tells me stay quiet, listen, everybody else is older. You're like, they don't really care for what you have to say. And I've been striving to, with my sister, is really easy. She always listens to what I have to say. She's my biggest cheerleader. But with my cousins, it's like I tend to not really talk about the things that I do unless they show interest. And this year, last year, maybe the year before, I've tried to be more intentional about sharing the things that I'm doing. Does that make sense? I need to find a different sentence. I keep on saying
No,
different.
no, it's your
Okay.
catchphrase. We're gonna put on a t-shirt. Does that
I
make
know.
sense? And
Dr.
start
T, does that
selling
make
it.
sense?
When you were sharing that, I began to think about my dominant narrative, and then I thought back that out of my peer group, like my, let's say, brother, sister, cousins, I'm the only one that grew up without both of my parents. Everyone else
Okay.
had both parents. So when I would get around these people, looking back now, I would automatically feel like I don't belong, and maybe I would show ways to make sure that I do belong, or that maybe I'm successful and things like that. So it was interesting when you shared that. I was looking back and I was like, wow, that's true because it does play an impact. Whereas I was like the silent achiever, where when I walk in, you can see it on me because of my energy and my outfit and everything like that. Because I felt so different. Because anytime I came around previously to meeting my mother and my father and my grandmother, who was so much older than everyone's parents, so it's obvious you stood out. So it's interesting to look back and to see how much of an impact that has on my life. Does everyone get to reach that realization, or how can we help them to reach it?
So in narrative therapy, we talk about unique outcomes, which is kind of the peripheral vision, the things that are outside that do not, that we've done or experiences we've had that are don't agree or do not validate our dominant narrative, which we often tend to just like push aside. In cognitive behavior therapy, we talk about cognitive distortion. We only let in things that fit with the narrative we're telling ourselves. So an easy example that I can give is I had a client once that struggled with depression. We were talking, using cognitive behavior therapy, narrative therapy, integrative, right? Integrating different things. Now she got a new job and she did amazingly well. It was a nonprofit. So they didn't have a lot of financial means, but they gave her a promotion. And with the promotion, they got like all their nice furniture to give her for like her space. And when she was saying that, when she was telling me that, and I was so excited for her, she's like, well, they needed to give it to somebody, right? Because in her mind, her dominant narrative tells her that she is not good enough. It's not because she is good, it's because they needed to give it to somebody. And when I did a mirroring, right, and I said, well, if I got a job at a place where they don't have like the financial means to give me a pay bump. But in lieu of that, they make sure that they gather all the nice furniture to give me to my space. What would that mean for me? She's like, oh my God, like they really appreciate you. They went out of their way to find something that they could give. And I started saying, why can you say that to yourself? Why would that be true with me, but not with you? Right? Because we distort the narrative coming in to fit with our narrative, with whatever is in here. I'll give a different example. I'm very talkative today. I came out of sessions like super hyped up and excited, and it's Friday. Okay. Um, if I think I've said this here once before, if I've never been cheated on before and my partner takes a phone call and goes into a different room, I may not look at it, not be bothered by it, or notice it, but think, likely the signal was bad or it was a private conversation. However, if I have a history of being cheated on, then I will likely see that behavior as now you're being sus, right? So I need you to prove to me that you are not cheating. I need you to prove a negative. That comes because of our construct of our experiences and that behavior fit into the narrative that I have that you're likely cheating on me because of what I've experienced before in spite
It's
of no actual data for that.
it's like the person that's always been abandoned, and they eventually start abandoning other people because they don't want to tap into them.
I had a client, I started the sentence with I had a client a lot. I mean, 13 years in the field, I've had many, but I had this one client that one of her biggest fears was to be alone. And so when she didn't have her daughter with her, custody, so sharing custody, she would lock herself in her house and not do anything. Now, mind you, she lived really close to the beach, but she spoke her fears into reality. Her biggest fear was to be alone. So, in order to not feel rejected by others, she would just be alone. Yeah.
Isolation, I find a lot of people use that as a way to maybe protect themselves from others. Well, Patricia, you know what? Before you can harm me, I'm going to lock myself in my house so you can't harm me. Or I'm not going to communicate with you. I'm not going to ask you questions because the answer, which I know what the answer is going to hurt me. And I rather it be a fantasy than a reality. Do people get trapped between the two?
Oh, yes. The I know what they're gonna say happens all the time. And I'll say this, like I know my husband super well. We've put in the work where the way he breathes, I can tell you whether or not is a sigh of relief, is stress, is work stress, is frustration, right? I still ask because there's a chance that maybe it was something else that I'm unaware of, though I'm really sure that I know, and I can even express like, I think I know what it is, but just to be sure, right? Because I think curiosity can be very helpful. Once we fall upon the I know what the other person is gonna say, therefore I stop asking, I'm making the decision for the other person. I remember a family member, let me not, with my clients, I always say like confidentiality goes both ways because I use my personal experiences, but let me not out people here. But a family member once expressed like, oh, I wanted to ask help from my kids. But immediately when I thought about asking for help, I'm like, well, this person is not going to be able to help. And that person, like, I don't want to intrude into your life. And that person, they're going through so much. So they just didn't say anything. And it didn't give anyone else the opportunity to say yes or no. Like, allow me to say no before you say no for me. Because maybe there would have been a yes. But we become so convinced that we know the answer, and sometimes we do, but sometimes we don't. And we become so convinced. Now, when we talk about anxiety, when we talk about depression, when we talk about like intrusive thoughts, they get fed in that internal conversation, right? Versus externalization, saying things out loud. It's kind of like breathing. For oxygen to come in, CO2 needs to go out. If I'm holding my breath, oxygen can't come in. CO2 is injurious to my body. Things are going to start going south.